It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
I grew up in Long Island, New York. I guess I was born there. And my family was into music. I wouldn't say they were musicians. I mean, there was always like music on in the car, and there were 8 tracks laying around the house. I think I just explained that I'm 142 years old. But so I would hear stuff like, variants of like, Elvis or, The Fifth Dimension or, some of the Motown stuff and and then obviously there's a bunch of Beatles stuff as well. So always had music around.
And what was your first instrument?
My first instrument was guitar. So, I mean, I started playing guitar actually by accident because I was a massive the first record I ever got was Kiss Destroyer. And it just clearly was about the coolest possible combination of things at that point that I'd ever heard of or seen. And I wanted to be a bass player. And my mother, meaning very well, just didn't know the difference and bought me a guitar. And I didn't have the heart to tell her that she had purchased the wrong instrument. So hence my lifelong guitar playing.
Have you told her yet?
Nah, why burst the bubble at this point?
And what led you to your first band? How old were you?
I mean, I think like everybody else, you try to find people with similar interests in your area. This is pre-driving or anything like that. So, your band, your ability to join bands is fairly limited to your, geography, walking geography, and how far you can carry your stuff. So, stuff in the local neighborhoods, and then, just various combinations of that, and then as you start to drive, you start to be able to play with musicians a little bit further out, and really, I mean, I would say the first band from a local point of view that I was in an international band before I was in a local band, really. I mean, I wound up when I was probably 17 or 18. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jeff Scott Soto.
Yes. Yep.
Well, he had heard a demo that I played on that someone else was auditioning for a band that he had when I was, I think, 17 or 18. And he wound up calling me up, and I went out to Los Angeles, like it looked like the Guns N' Roses video, showing up off the bus with the Appetite for Destruction.
Yeah.
So I met with Jeff and we jammed on a bunch of different things, and he wound up asking me to play with him doing a tour in Sweden with this band Talisman, which featured the late great Marcel Jacob on bass, and so that was my first, like, strangely enough, like actually professional real band doing stuff.
Wow. I
was working on developing Saigon Kick with stuff at home with some people, but that would be the thing I would say was probably my first real band.
And how was that tour?
I mean, look, it was about the greatest possible. I mean, you couldn't even imagine being, I was home working.
I can't.
I was home working, like anybody else, or had a sub delivery job or whatever it was when you're 18, and the next thing you're making money to play guitar, and you're in this, wonderland of all over Sweden, and playing with, brilliant musicians. I mean, that, it just raises your game, just being around people like that. So it was an amazing experience, and, opened my eyes to a lot of, just how things work.
And why didn't you stay with the band when you came back from the tour?
It really was just this thing that they would tour. I mean, collectively, I probably spent, a year or more over there, just in 2 chunks or six week chunks. And actually, we went back and recorded, I think, 2 Saigon Kick records in Stockholm as well. So, spent a lot of time in Sweden. And it's just an amazing city. But, it wasn't a band like where we were going to be on the road 12 months a year. It was really kind of regional to that area. So we would do a month or two, and then everybody had different projects they were working on. And it worked out really well and allowed me to have, the Saigon Kick thing kind of develop. Now,
didn't you have a band pre-Saigon Kick with Matt?
We had different variations of stuff. I mean, I'm terrible with names. I mean, Matt and I had like bounced around different things and tried different things, and so I mean, there was incarnations and stuff. I wouldn't say anything that did more than a couple of shows or a little demo here or there.
Yeah, I thought I saw a video on YouTube of you guys playing once of some pre-band.
Yeah, I'm sure. Matt and I wound up. I mean, strange enough, we met being. I was trying to get into this band that was like the band down here, and it was a band called Crier, and on the local scene, they were just these legends. And obviously, I didn't make the band, and I just kept hanging around. And Matt and I, we were the only 2 guys left over that couldn't get in anybody else's band. So, I don't even know if we
Oh
were
well.
that to play with each other in the first place. We just kind of we had no choice.
And was this in Florida? At what point did you move down to Florida?
I moved to Florida with my Ferrari when I was 9 or 10, 11. So yeah, really young.
The story that I always heard in terms of Saigon Kick was something to do with Skid Row, how you got signed. Is that true?
It's partially true. I mean,
Well, so what is the story?
basically, we were a really, really hungry, hardworking band, and we knew that Skid Row was playing an off date. This is when they were opening, I think, for Bon Jovi on that massive kind of world tour thing. And so in our logic, we said, well, Skid Row is going to play this place called Summers on the Beach on the day before the show. So if we can go in there and open for them, obviously everybody from Atlantic Records goes to every show that Skid Row does all around the world. So
Clearly.
So it'll be, it was genius at work. So we went into the club and they said, absolutely not, get out of here. We went to the club again. They threatened to throw us out violently. So the only other solution I had was to go to an ATM and take out all the money we had and just give the guy cash, which strangely enough worked. And he gave us like this 30-minute set. And so we figured, okay, it's next month we'll be number one on MTV. It's this is how it works. And we played the show, and nobody from Atlantic was there, and no one from Skid Row was actually there when we played. But one of Skid Row's techs actually saw the show, and wound up mentioning that this band got something pretty cool, and you should check them out. So in a way, it kind of helped get the word to Atlantic. During the next 6 months to a year, what really kind of tipped the scales is we became, in this area, monstrously big. So we were selling out like, 1,500 seat venues 2 nights in a row.
Wow.
And it's amazing how quickly labels pay attention to stuff like that.
Yeah, money.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were, so that really kind of, literally we didn't have a real demo tape of Saigon Kick per se or any kind of package as much as, literally Michael Wagner, who's a legendary producer, Jason Flom, Dave Feld, and a bunch of people from Atlantic came to this show, including publishing people that we had sold out at this venue called the Button South, saw the show. Michael Wagner came back, hung out, and said, look, I have like literally 10 days before I do my next project. Let's go to Los Angeles tomorrow and make a record. And, Jason Flom was very supportive. And we literally, it's like the quintessential went to a restaurant next to the venue, signed a basic memo, and then, within the next day or so, we were in Los Angeles recording the debut record.
Before we go into the recording, I'm very curious about the fact that you got that big locally without even a demo tape. How did you get so big?
Initially, and it shows you how far off mark we eventually got, initially, we were really at the forefront of what I would kind of call that heavy alternative movement. So we were really inspired by bands like Jane's Addiction and Soundgarden. And at the same time, we were really inspired by things like the Beatles and Queen. And, our kind of vision was to kind of merge that sense of melodic stuff with some of the heavier stuff. And, seeing Jane's Addiction, I saw them at the Cameo Theater down here open for Iggy Pop before even Nothing Shocking came out, I think. And it was just, they were a heavy band, but they weren't silly. And at the time, hair metal was at the height of its silliness to me. Not that there weren't great bands, and not being disrespectful at all to any of those bands, but it was at that point where it was just getting silly. And I think we had touched the right nerve locally where we were a lot more aggro, not really a hair band in the quintessential sense. So the scene kind of exploded around us, fortunately. And that it really just became, I think all scenes have that at different times. It was a pretty special, series of circumstances that kind of led us to, the scene grew at the same time we did.
Now, you get signed very, very quickly. You're in LA. What was that recording like working with Michael?
I mean, Michael's everything you'd expect him to be. He's just this amazing wealth of knowledge, and obviously his career speaks for itself, so I don't have to give him any props on that sense. I mean, the guy's just a genius, and it was a lot of fun. It was a very quick process, so I don't know that, it's a record that I look back on and think everything's the way it's supposed to be. I think it was more about capturing a moment and a vibe at the time, and I think he wanted to just figure out whatever we were doing live and kind of put that on a record. It was, obviously it's an honor just to work with a guy like that.
And you became the producer immediately after. So were you taking notes pretty heavily, or when did your production side start developing?
Well, I'd always done the majority of the writing and demoing of stuff, and not in any way to discount or disrespect Michael's talents. It's just, I think every artist has a vision of how they hear things sounding, and I felt like, we should sound different than the first record per se, and found a great engineer in Sweden named Ronnie Laddie, who's just brilliant. And I'm just not one. I'm personally just not one for the LA, like, let's, the Hollywood recording thing wasn't my thing, where every night you're hanging out with some band at the Rainbow or whatever. It just wasn't for me. I preferred being in Stockholm and away from everybody else, and really kind of focusing on the music and that process, and just kind of, it took the next step from, I guess, the demoing process. And started, I'm just a firm believer. Life does not come in hand. You're never going to be in a situation where someone's going to say, "Hey, would you love to produce and engineer your next record?" You kind of have to grab the bull by the horns and say, "Don't worry about it, I got it," and then do a lot of reading and Googling. Hope for the best.
Pre-Google, though.
Pre-Google.
I'm amazed you convinced the label to let you do it.
Well, that was the key thing, to do it away from them. So, but no, look, I think it just worked out. The schedule worked out, and I was allowed to do it. And look, it really shaped the whole side of me, and gave me a ton of, experience, and enabled me to do a lot of other stuff. And, but yeah, it was kind of one of those things. I think in life, sometimes you just have to, grab it and run with it. And fortunately, I was able to do it.
So this first record comes out. I remember What You Say was kind of my first introduction, a video for that. What was the response like when the record came out?
I think for us, it was always been very, very strange, because we had one foot firmly in one camp, and then one foot firmly in the other camp. And we never really found a home anywhere in terms of stylistically or a scene. So, initially we were touring with bands like Faith No More. We literally toured with the Ramones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then we toured with Cheap Trick, and then we toured with Rat. So, if nothing else, I think we have one of the most diverse touring backgrounds of any artist at that time. So, but we were never really, embraced by the hair bands, and we were never really embraced by the grunge movement that was coming up at the time too, because we kind of floated in this no man's land. Like, I imagine, a similar thing with Extreme and to a certain degree, King's X probably. And there's just a few bands I think that got caught right in between the changing of the guard. So the first record did well. I think it sold a couple 100,000 copies at that time, considered an ultimate failure. Now I think that's like platinum.
Yeah, it's huge now.
Yeah, but it was obviously successful enough that we were able to move forward, and we were really fortunate in that sense that enough people got what we were doing, and we were able to tour and support it. And we went and toured. We played with Ozzy in Japan, and Primus in Europe. We did a few shows with, and so really all over the map.
So then, when the next record comes out, recorded in Sweden, how was the band holding together at that point? Because that's right before you started losing some members.
Right. I think it's like I wish it was a much more original story. It's just not. Creatively, it was a land grab on my own part as much as anybody else's, and I just had no sense of I think some guys felt like we should try to do this kind of. I think like Skid Row made a really conscious effort on Slave to the Grind to become more Pantera-like, or try to do that direction.
At least heavier, anyway.
Right, and some of the guys felt like we should be doing that, and I was like, no, we should get weirder and more esoteric and just more bizarre, and so that was already starting to stir. But I don't think the hatred had to any great degree begun yet. It was just post that album. And then we had gone to Mexico to film a video for Hostile Youth, which was one of those kind of heavier bass tracks. And when we got back, we got a call from the label saying, this station in South Florida started playing the ballad, and it appears to have all the markings of, a mega huge, ballad hit. And you have two choices. You don't really have any choice. We're just going to go with that single, and the rest is kind of almost history.
And that was right around the time of probably Mr. Big single. Extreme probably had their single around the same time. Like, that was the acoustic single was the big deal right then.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, the first record had the same balance on it
Yeah.
in terms of it was a ballad. You know, it wasn't a conscious effort, and I never apologized for it. I mean, it's on the record. You know, it's amazing to have a song that touches that many people. You know, that way, it's fantastic. I like to think, and I've made this reference a number of times, that we literally had the ballad that killed hair metal, um, and so therefore Nirvana and Dave Grohl would not have a career had I not sacrificed, on the altar there for them. But yeah, it was an amazing experience, and but we knew what was happening. I mean, all the hair bands hated us, and we were not cool enough to go to the cocktail parties with all the new grunge bands. So we were kind of left in no man's land. So it was a bittersweet pill in that sense. You could see that, okay, this is mega huge. The record's gold, singles platinum, and it's selling. But you also get the real, you're not going to any of the cool parties in Hollywood.
And I think on that record you toured with Extreme, right?
Yes. We toured with them twice. We toured them on the first record in Europe. And then when this record came out and started doing well, we toured with them in the States.
And that seems like such a logical fit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still friends. I don't want to jump ahead, but I actually did a project with Pat Badger from that band, and we did some stuff for the American Pie soundtrack and all that stuff. But still friends, still talk to Pat. We were just laughing because last week he was playing M3 with Extreme, and we did a show with Saigon Kick with Avenged Sevenfold and Volbeat and all that, and we were both texting back like, how bizarre is it that some 20 years later we're talking to each other as both of our bands are going on these different festival dates. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, playing for huge crowds.
Yeah, who'd have thought?
Now, again, so at this point, I think, so you had Tom leave before the tour started, right? For The Lizard?
Absolutely.
And then Matt at the end of the tour.
Matt left right at the beginning of doing the Water record.
Oh, okay. So what was the state of the band heading into the Water record then?
Volatile. Everybody having different visions of what should happen, how it should go. The typical band stuff. I mean, we wanted to kill each other. Seeing different. I mean, just about every possible issue you could discuss. I mean, people always ask, "What's it like with the band?" Or these. I mean, I can only if you've ever had a relationship with a woman when it just goes horribly wrong. It's like that. It's like that times 4. You find like just watching the person breathe annoys you. Like it's very similar to that kind of situation.
Now, as a producer heading into Water, having done The Lizard, what confidence level, what skill level did you feel you're at?
I don't think. I mean, obviously, you feel like, okay, hey, I did this, and whether purposefully or not, it was a big success.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I had the ability to make the record the way I wanted to hear it. I never really thought about it like, hey, can I make another hit record? I mean, obviously, that's the game in the business you're in when you're on a major label. As much as I thought, I was pretty confident I could get done what I wanted to get done musically.
And with the shift over to vocals, how big of a decision was that? Was it as soon as Matt was gone, okay, I'm singing now, or did you audition other singers?
No, we never auditioned other singers. I mean, I had always sang the majority of the stuff in demo form. And I think Matt's got a very, very cool tone to his voice, and there's a definite difference when he's singing with the band, for sure. That being said, the key elements of the backing vocals and stuff like that, I think, retain some of its character. So we felt like, we were so oblivious to, fortunately oblivious to, and I think Stockholm, again, helped that. It was literally the 4 of us in a strange land in this magical place. So you're not sitting here reading all these magazines or hearing, oh, Jason's an idiot, the band's going to fail, who's going to replace Matt? You're just in there making a record. So, we just figured, hey, let's just do what we do and make a record. And I think it was a really healthy thing in that sense. There was none of that kind of, it was too far away for the label to come visit for the most part. And we were blissfully ignorant to the potentials of, losing your front man.
And when the record came out, did the label push it or did they just kind of dump it?
I don't know if they dumped. I mean, I know it sold a couple 100,000 copies, so it went back to the original kind of area sale. So it wasn't, again, today a mega huge record, but obviously for like Saigon Kick fans, you have a real split camp. Half of them think I should be boiled alive, and half of them think the band should go on that way. And that's awesome, and I can respect that and understand that. There's bands I feel the same way about. So, but It went on to have some really massive success in other parts of the world that we had never even touched before. So there's kind of like these two distinct chapters or versions of the band's life musically.
That was the Philippines, right?
Indonesia and parts of Asia, yeah.
Tell me about that, because that was you look at bands, similar bands like Mr. Big, huge in Japan at that time, where it was kind of dwindling in the States. How was it for you guys to have parts of the world where you had, what song was it that was a hit?
I Love You, off the water. It was so bizarre. I mean, we're sitting here, we kind of under the unwinding of the Saigon Kick machine in terms of the U.S., the label, all that kind of stuff, and then you get this weird call, like, it's like Spinal Tap, like, Sex Farm's gone to #1 in Japan, and you're like, what? So they're like, you're massive, and I, at that time I had to even figure out where Indonesia was. I was like, where exactly is that?
So you'd never toured there before?
No, we'd never been there, never anything like that. And so, literally we hear we're going to go play this show. So we kind of jump on this series of flights from where we live in South Florida, or where we lived at the time. It's literally about the farthest place on Earth to travel to. It's like 30 hours of flights. And, we land in Jakarta, completely jet lagged. You go out through the typical customs thing. And there is just like a swarm of people going nuts. And, we're like, this is really strange. And we get ushered by a military group into this big bus. And we're flying out of the airport. And we're right behind all these cops. And I'm like, we're going to get in big trouble for following these cops that close. We shouldn't. And they literally had shut down like the highways going into Jakarta. And we had no idea the magnitude of the band's success in that part of the world. So it was, it was surreal to say the least.
And how did that even happen?
The song just was played and became, it's still to this day, it's like one of the biggest songs in, I have the Stairway to Heaven of Indonesia. So, still to this day, it's real popular over there. And I mean, amazing people, a beautiful country. We got to play places that, to travel to places, I mean, that you would never in a million years get to go to. I mean, not only Jakarta, but Surabaya, a town called Bandung, and Bali we did a bunch of stuff in. And, Surabaya would be most famous for being the port in which they left in the Jessica Lange King Kong movie.
All right. To
Skull Island. I think that was from Surabaya. So I've been there, and I am a rock star in Surabaya. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Sebastian.
Yeah. And how was the touring in the rest of the world for that record?
Good. I mean, we did successful club tour in Japan. We played Hong Kong. I want to say we did stuff in Singapore that was really great. We did some TV shows. We did some stuff in Europe, around France. I really am not, I mean, and I know this is going to sound like one of those, I actually enjoy playing in front of less people. And sometimes my career has helped me with that. But
as opposed to an empty people, right?
I don't like empty people, obviously, but, but I will say there's times I enjoy sound check more than the show. But, I really like, these couple hundred people, to me is like great. You're expressing the music. You're back and forth. I mean, and I just played in front of whatever it was, 15,000 people last weekend, and I mean it's fun. It's an amazing thing. My son seeing that's awesome for the ego and all those things. I don't know that it's as rewarding of a musical experience.
Yeah, sure. Or playing even a theater as opposed to.
It's just more fun, I think, when you can really relate to each person. And see and give that back and forth. So for me, the tour was fine.
And that was the last record on Atlantic. So what went down with them?
They have this weird philosophy of if you don't sell a lot of records, they don't really want to do a lot of business with you anymore. I was really good friend. I wasn't even a dropping. I mean, to this day, Jason Flom is a basically family member to me. And I mean, I'm not an idiot. I know what's going on. Like, there's no way we should be spending $300,000+ to make another Saigon Kick record when the writing's on the wall in terms of how things sit right now, and the label can't, things have changed, and he's got to move on, and the label has to do what the label has to do to survive and make money and keep their people employed, and we have to do the same. So it was kind of obvious what was going to happen.
I remember a story about Jenny Lane saying the Warrant posters were down and the Alice in Chains poster was up, and he knew it was over.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't really. I mean, I have to say, the people at Atlantic, and I'm not saying that the people at CBS for Warrant weren't. We were always cool, but there was always a transparency about what was going on. and it was really a, it wasn't like that. Like we felt like it's just it was a very civil ending with very good people who just realized like, hey, this is probably not going to work much longer.
So on the next record, you popped up on CMC, which seemed to be the first of the small labels, small rock labels, and there's been a few along the way, but they seem to now finding ways to have like niche success. But in terms of budget and recording process, how was it when you made the switch to CMC?
Well, we did a deal actually with a company from Japan called Pony Canyon, who was massive. I believe they were part owners of Nintendo or vice versa. I mean, we, from a financial standpoint, we were fine budgetarily.
Right.
And then we had done the deal or licensed the deal to CMC in the U.S.
I see.
It was a weird time because I think, now, I mean, I think, for all intents and purposes, and I run a label, but it's the label is not an essential piece of the puzzle. It's a great piece to have when all things are firing, and it's a great piece if you still want to have that Adele-sized success. It's a great piece, but this, we didn't have the ability to talk with our fans like you do now to that degree. I mean, the internet was just starting, and it was kind of that transition between these kind of like you're saying small niche-based stuff to where we are now. So the record did what it was going to do. We did a bit of touring behind it. I wouldn't say too extensive, but yeah, I mean it was obviously it's different when you have a mega hit on one of the biggest labels in the world versus not having a hit on a smaller independent label. The work and the way things work is just a lot different.
And in terms of being on Pony Canyon, did they bring you to Japan as a tour?
We did a bunch of shows. We did a couple shows in Tokyo. We went back to Indonesia for some stuff. I think for New Year's Eve we did some stuff over there. And but I don't remember. I've been terrible with remembering everything. But I think it was fairly limited, the touring.
And did your success in Indonesia carry over with this record?
Yeah, I mean it was. We had yeah, I mean it was pretty successful. Yeah, I mean I don't know exactly what it wound up being, but we went back there and did another video and another series of like kind of special appearances and stuff, and it stayed pretty true.
Now their next record, Bastards, that one was a different one because the sound changed. I don't think it ever got released outside of Japan. Was that still on Pony Canyon?
That was on Pony Canyon. We had a 2-record obligation to them or with them, and it was kind of a transition for us because we were starting to move towards this other. Or I should say, I was starting to move towards this other project, or writing different stuff, and it was kind of that bridge between, I think, the end of Saigon Kick and the beginning of what became Super TransAtlantic.
Yeah, that's right.
At the time, so yeah, but it was only released in Japan.
Now I recall that record had a Police cover, which was super cool, but it also sounded very different than the rest of it, like in its mastering, or was that recorded separately and tacked on? How did that happen? Because I remember hearing it and it's like, oh, that sounds different now. There's something in the vocal and the audio quality sound.
Yeah, I don't remember, to be honest with you. I have to look that up and email it back to you. I'm not sure. I mean, I know like we recorded a lot of that ourselves. That's when I was starting to get more into the recording of. I know we had like at the time the state of the art ADAT, or as I like to call them, glorified VCR recording. And so we did a lot of the stuff like that, and then we did some stuff at Morris Sound Studios in Tampa, which was amazing, and a lot of it at home. So a lot of stuff was mixed and matched and pulled from different areas. So not 100% sure.
And around that time, I think the internet at that point had developed, and you were on there pretty early. How did that change things for you?
It was really cool. I mean, yeah, I had experimented with actually selling music directly to fans. I was a pioneer, I like to say, but far before anybody was paying attention to it. But yeah, I was doing like MP3s and CDs for fans. Developing a whole little kind of world or ecosystem around the stuff I was doing at that time. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, obviously it's a lot easier now. I mean, with things like Bandcamp and all these amazing tools. And Facebook and Twitter, we can go on and on and on. But it was in the early days of that, it was a lot of fun to just be able to have that. Anytime you can communicate directly with people who are interested in your work is great.
At that point, were you in touch at all with any of the ex-members at all? Like, say, were you and Matt at all in contact?
Matt and I really had no contact from the time he left the band on that Water record until probably, I'd say now, maybe 2 years ago.
And then for Moments from the Fringe, well, you had Moments from the Fringe, and then you had a solo record. What happened first?
Well, I'm not. Again, I hate to say, around the same time they came out, Moments from the Fringe was really just all these little outtakes and bits and pieces of demos or things that I thought, people who would, I always like hearing how things kind of develop, so I thought that would be a fun thing for some people to check out. We did that in a really limited run. And the same thing was really true of the solo thing. It wasn't so much like a solo record as much as like, here's all these, roughs of things that were like sketches that didn't really have a home. I just, figured if they're, rather than just let them die lonely and cold on some kind of hard drive in some form of binary, let them see the light of day, and people who really care that much about what's going on might find some pleasure in it.
And then Moments on the Fringe also came out in England, right? Dreamcatcher?
I think it was, I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think it was licensed, or we did, I know the whole run was maybe a couple thousand copies. I mean, by far it was more of a file sharing kind of success than a selling success.
Right. Oh, well, I got a copy here, so it must be a collector's item. I'm rich.
Very good. I might have to borrow that from you if I need to get the raw songs back so I can.
That leads us into Super TransAtlantic, which was an interesting record. You had Pat Badger on there. Now, it seemed like he came on at the very end of things. Did he come in and basically re-record bass tracks, or was he involved earlier on?
There was an earlier version of it, and it's such a bizarre series of events, but we wound up having a song that was getting some airplay, started to blow up. The original bass player, a guy named George Fodiatis, who's a brilliant bass player, had left, and we had Pat come in. We wrote a bunch of new stuff, had some of the old stuff, and reworked the record a bit. A few different times. We had originally done the record with George out in Los Angeles with the legendary producer Jack Joseph Puig, who did like the Jellyfish records and all this stuff. Who's just an amazing, talented guy. And we were with, I want to say, MCA at the time we got signed, and then we were dropped by MCA. Then our song started to blow up, and we were picked up by Universal, and wound up being part of the American Pie soundtrack.
Something a little interesting happened at that time, because I remember was it out of frustration or something, but you just dumped the record online and made it available for download before it came out. What happened there?
I don't know. I don't remember that, actually, but if you say it did, I did. I'm not really sure. I mean, there's different versions. There's two distinct versions of that record. So one that was mixed and done by Jack that I think is the brilliant version. So I know I put some of the rough mixes and stuff at different points up. I wasn't even frustration. It's just the same thing. I mean, these big companies, especially at the time, are looking for hits. And when things aren't hits, they tend to move on to the next thing. So I'm sure there was some version of the music that we just figured, hey, it's done and I'm not going to bury it. If you're not going to put it out, that's fine. But,
When the record did come out, it seemed like it was just dropped out and I'm in Canada here, and it didn't get released in Canada. I had to order a copy in from Amazon in the States.
Right.
It seemed like this record came out, and it was just kind of dumped and forgotten. Is that how it felt on your side?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, no harm, no. I mean, look. I mean, it's like a lot of bands complain about this and do that. These companies are in it for one thing, and it doesn't make them. They want to have huge successes, and they're always clamoring their ability to feed their family. And speaking specifically of the lower level A&R people and the marketing people and the radio promotion people, is based directly on working records that are succeeding. And if a record, for whatever reason, timing or otherwise, is not succeeding, I mean, they tend to want to jump to the next thing so they can continue their history of employment.
As a guy who owns a label, do you find that helps you see both sides?
Without a doubt. I mean, I just make sure that we're set up to be different just by the nature of what we do as a label than the majors are. I mean, the majors is being on a major label is the same thing as being on a major sports franchise. I mean, it's like you're there to deliver a mega hit. It's not about patting people on the shoulder. Oh, good try, good try. You know, if the Yankees recruit or whoever, or the Canadians or the Maple Leafs or the Florida Panthers hire players that suck, the fans aren't all there going, oh, what a good effort. Next time try. You're in the big leagues. You're there to do a specific thing, and when you don't do that specific thing, and it happens to hockey players all the time. I mean, these great players that just for whatever reason don't have a dominant season, or things don't line up, or they're on the wrong line, or they don't get enough ice time. They wind up getting, not play. It's, but that's what the big leagues are. That's the nature of that thing. Our label was big enough to do a fantastic job developing artists, but we're also big enough. We're also self-contained enough to spend a lot of time developing artists. So, a band like Skindred or Nonpoint, we were able to commit years of developing to, or Carnival. Carnival right now is bigger now than they were when we released them, and that's 5 years ago. So we're more long haul, but that's just the nature of we can't afford like the majors do to sign and drop as much. We have to sign stuff, and we have to find a way to make it a success.
What led you to form the label? How did that process go?
Well, I still had all my relationships and experience over the years of working with all different companies, and started producing a lot of stuff, or getting asked to produce a lot of stuff, and developed a relationship with MCA Records at the time. This is post Super TransAtlantic, so I redeveloped my relationship with MCA. To make a long story short, we wound up developing a band called Nonpoint. Did that through MCA. We were managing them, had a good degree of success at the time with them. Did another couple of bands with them, which led to a 3-year imprint deal as our label. When MCA eventually merged with Geffen, we wound up going and doing our imprint with Lava, which was Jason Flom again. So full circle back to him. And we had some really good success with a band called Skindred at that point. And then we moved to a fully independent situation over at ADA Distribution. And spent a number of years there with some really great people, and we are now with E1 Distribution as a label. So kind of grew it. Yeah,
that seems like a good fit. And along this time, were you producing the bands as well?
Some. I mean, that's a it depends. I mean, if it made sense and we could do some great stuff together, we would try it. If not, I mean, I was happy to work with other pre-done records, or it had nothing to do with the production of Carnival. Or a silent film we had. I thought had a great record. We did Fiction Plane, which was Sting's son's band, that had a real good run of success. Those were records that were done absolutely outside of our system, and some records we did do internally.
And how is the state of the music business as a little independent label? Is it how do you fare through that?
I mean, for us, we've always been fortunate. We have a relatively tight-knit organization. We've had a lot of success, which obviously is the key to keeping any business open. We try to be really smart. When I look across our roster, I mean, we've been very fortunate and worked with a lot of brilliant bands that have made some degree of impact. So, the key, it's like even being in a band. I mean, the key is the song or how great the record is, and that's true for a label's decisions, and that's true for an artist's decisions. That you're going to live or die by the music, and we've made more good decisions than bad as a label, and I'm really proud of what we've achieved.
So in the last couple of years, you've had a couple things come back up. You've had Saigon Kick return, and then Owl Stretching.
Yes.
What led to the Saigon Kick coming back?
We wound up just having these random calls, or like these offers would come in to do this or that, and we would kind of, maybe hop on a call going back a few years ago, and then, I would never, and then it would go away, and then it would, come back. And then we finally just decided, I think last year, look, let's just do, 5 initial shows in very small venues, in random places around the country, and see, if we have fun, just what it's like, if it works. We didn't want to do a tour. We didn't want to get involved in a whole thing, or, all of a sudden, Saigon Kicks back and here's their campaign to raise funds or any of that stuff. We just wanted to do, these shows, feel each other out and see how it worked. And the shows went over far beyond our expectations. Everything sold out in advance, which was nice. And the response from people who really understood what the band was about and their passion level was it was humbling. So it was a lot of fun. And we went to Los Angeles, New York, obviously a few shows in Florida, Las Vegas. And we had a good time. So we've just kind of taken it very, very slow, and we just played in Orlando 2 weeks ago with All That Remains and Filter and Fuel and a bunch of great bands. And then last weekend we played at the Tampa St. Pete Forum with Avenged Sevenfold, Volbeat, Blackstone Cherry, Fozzy, and a bunch of stuff. And it's been just really cool and taking our time and doing shows that make sense.
Any plans to record?
We've talked about it. I mean, and it's something we're going to entertain. It's we just look. There's so many sad stories of old bands putting songs together that are just horrible.
Yeah.
We just want to avoid that if we can. So if we come up with something that we think is really, on par or as good or something even for that matter better than that would make people really be interested in what we're doing, then we'll consider doing a song or a few songs, or as the quality of the material warrants, we would take it from there. But we're not in any rush to do it.
Well, clearly the band has some juice, and then you own a label, so that was a very nice political answer. But tell me a bit about Owl Stretching then.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to be creative. I wanted to take all the filtering off. Kind of going back to what I was doing originally, maybe 15 years ago, and just release music. And that's been even, not to belittle the Saigon Kick stuff, the Alternatives has just taken on a life of its own. It's developed this little system of people that grows every day. And it's just been really fun. I mean, I do whatever I want to do. I'm not so worried about the perfect mix or the perfect song or what style it is or anything other than here's something I've worked on to the group of people who care. And it's just been really amazing and fun. And it's kind of taken on a little bit of a life of its own. So.
It must be very satisfying just to crank something out and just be able to just put it out there.
It's amazing to sit in my studio and then, finish something and then, 45 minutes later be hearing people talk about it. And
yeah.
It's just unbelievable. It was, those are the things to me that makes technology, has just improved so unbelievably. You'd finish a record and it'd be 6 months before you heard what people thought of it, or a year for that matter before people thought of it. Now it's minutes. And the great thing is when you do something to whatever degree quality, I mean, people talk about it and it grows and it has the ability to spread. And, whether that's to, a few thousand people or a few 100,000 people, it still can do that. And that was impossible before.
And what would be the future now for you?
I'm going to continue to do I'm doing a ton of stuff. I've been speaking at a lot of music conferences as of late, strangely enough.
Interesting.
I've been doing that as a panelist. I'm considering doing a kind of songs kind of tour that really is focused on just different songs from different points of the catalog, just because I think it's easier for me to go out and do stuff than to move the whole machinery of a Saigon Kick. So I was thinking of trying to put together a really kind of cool, evening of just different songs from different time periods in select markets.
Would that be an acoustic show or would that be with a band?
I think I'm still assembling the concept. Cool. I'm not sure. For all I know, it could be me and a laptop.
Yeah.
And but we're working that out, and then
that's cool.
I just been trying to contribute. Obviously run the labels. Been we're signing new stuff and developing that. I've been focusing a lot on guitar playing and music lately, so I've taken on a very limited number of Skype students.
All right. Cool.
For some stuff like that. So, just staying busy and being, look, every day. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I've never worked a real day in my life.
Running a label, that's not work.
It's work, but you're in the music, but I'm not digging trenches.
That's true.
Those guys are working. The military guys, they're working. You meet me, I get up and I make music, or I listen to a song and then I critique the mix. It's not exactly the hardest job in the world, and when you love it. I've been very lucky to be able to do it my whole life. So,
okay, Jason, thanks very much for taking the time.
No worries, man. Thank you for taking the time.